I mean, first of all, everybody had their own gods, right? I mean, each culture, each ethnicity had their gods, their traditions, their customs. And Yahweh is the jealous God. The God of Israel is the jealous God. And one of the, you have this theme of idol worship throughout the Bible, and it has a negative connotation. But I mean, the Romans were technically idol worshippers because they weren't worshiping the God of Israel. But, Yahweh, the jealous God, under the story, obviously, I don't actually believe this, but Yahweh wants everybody to worship him, which involves letting go of your traditions, letting go of your cultures. I find that to be a very sad thing, and I can't help but see how, you have a strong Roman pagan empire focused on warrior culture. You go from worshiping gods that were warriors themselves to a god that literally did not fight back at all and got killed.
Welcome to the Renaissance of Men podcast. My name is Will Spencer. My guest this week is Andrew Howard, and he's the Chief Business Development Officer of Bitcoin Reserve, plus a husband, father, and U.S. Marine Corps veteran. He's recently left the Christian faith and graciously agreed to come on the podcast to talk about it. Back in July, he posted on Twitter a thread of tweets, which began like this, quote, "Been meaning to post this for a while. Here we go. I am no longer a Christian. I've always pursued truth and can't force myself to believe things that don't make sense to me. There's no religion higher than truth. The best cure for Christianity is reading the Bible. Mark Twain." I replied to Andrew saying, "I'm sorry to read this. If I may, I'd say that these objections indicate you weren't properly a Christian to begin with. That's not an insult. Very few who grow up Christian like you did today are taught what they believe and why, to the point it changes their heart. And I will give them one heart, and a new spirit I will put within them. I will remove the heart of stone from their flesh and give them a heart of flesh." Ezekiel 11:19. There are answers to all your questions and objections. Are you interested in a dialogue about this? And then Andrew agreed to come on the podcast and have that very dialogue, which you're about to hear. I thought it was an important discussion to have, because whether Andrew was properly discipled in the Christian faith or not is irrelevant to the fact that men with energy, intellect, and intensity like him are essential to the future of Christianity. And Christians don't grow out of the ground. We're either given birth to and discipled or recruited, and recruitment is much faster. So if Christians can't speak to masculine men today who are fathers, protectors, and builders, who have the testosterone levels to fight for this world, rather than pietistically living for the next, then I think it's worth reflecting whether those of us in Christ and advocating for him are truly living out our faith and communicating it in the right way. So I thought I'd give it a try, and I'd like to thank Andrew for being my partner in this spirited discussion. Before we got into apologetics, Andrew and I discussed something that we have in common, an appreciation for Bitcoin, including fiat currency and war, how to Bitcoinize Latin America, the process of onboarding to Bitcoin, hyperinflation versus slow adoption, and finally, the significant generational wealth millennials are about to inherit from boomers. Then, after about half an hour, we got right into it. I hope you enjoy. And I hope you recognize that I'm not a professional apologist. I'm just a man who works to make sure that the things that I believe touch ground and touch grass. If you enjoy the Renaissance of Men podcast, thank you. Please like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Plus, leave a comment down below letting us know what you thought about this dialogue. And please welcome this week's guest on the podcast, a husband, father, and former soldier with some hard questions every Christian should know how to answer, Andrew Howard. Andrew, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, well, great to be here. Looking forward to getting into some interesting, possibly controversial topics today. So
I am
thanks for
all
having me.
for. Oh, you're welcome. I'm all for interesting and controversial. So, I just wanted to say, I mentioned this before we talked. You posted a bunch of tweets about Christianity maybe a couple weeks ago, something like that, and I really appreciated. Like, I responded, and you said that you'd be open to a dialogue about it, and so I just wanted to start by saying thank you for that, because I think it's really important that men find the ability to talk about points of disagreement, openly, rationally, and as brothers, instead of immediately like going hard and attacking each other. Like, okay, let's actually talk about it instead of turn Twitter into a continuous, ongoing battleground.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think men are confrontational by nature, or should be confrontational by nature, and that's how we've established hierarchies and determine what truth is and stuff like that. But Twitter is a very unnatural way to have that confrontation. So I think you and I agree on a lot.
Exactly.
And I also have to say I find some irony in the cool-looking Roman helmet in the background, given that you're a Christian.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's go. So let's start with some of the points of disagreement because I'm actually big supporter of Bitcoin, big fan. In fact, I was just advocating it for at church this past Sunday with a couple guys, explaining it to them. They're like, "Well, what's the difference between Bitcoin and crypto?" I'm like, "Well, first of all, like throw out crypto, completely throw that out from your vocabulary." But I'm finding that more and more Christians, in particular, are discovering it, which is very exciting. But your work with the Bitcoin Reserve is also of interest to me because we got into the subject of how to buy Bitcoin, how to store it. I went to the Thank God for Bitcoin conference with Zuby and a bunch of others back in Florida. So it's a big subject for me. So let's start with your work with the Bitcoin Reserve and maybe get an update on where Bitcoin is at right now. Because I know we pulled out of that big dip for a while, but it seems like I don't know if uncertainty is quite really the word for how I describe the moment, but the path forward seems a bit less clear than it has in the past.
Yeah, so I'll start off with a background on myself, who I am, what I'm doing, all that stuff. So yeah, name is Andrew Howard. I have been Chief Business Development Officer at a Bitcoin-only brokerage called Bitcoin Reserve. I'm also a partial owner in the company as well. I got involved in Bitcoin in early 2017 when I was active duty in the United States Marine Corps, actually. And I read a few books. One of them was The Creature from Jekyll Island, which maybe a lot of your listeners have also read. Basically, the book is like an encyclopedia of the Federal Reserve and the origins of the Federal Reserve and how it's actually against the interest of the American people. And America had several central banks before the creation of the Federal Reserve, and they were disbanded because they're effectively, arguably unconstitutional. So that really opened my eyes up a lot on the monetary system. And I had never really thought about the relationship between all of these meaningless wars that the United States has been involved with and the money system. And practically speaking, it would be impossible for these wars to be funded if it weren't for the United States being able to essentially print or nowadays digitally create money out of thin air, and have debt-based money. So fast forward, went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, got out of the Marine Corps, joined Bitcoin Reserve, and effectively my professional life is very much so merged with my personal life, which I'm very happy to say, because I really do believe Bitcoin will create a much better world. I think we're going to have a more peaceful world under a Bitcoin standard because, again, wars would not be able to be waged the way they are today.
Yep.
I think the cost of things, I think everything would cost 1/10 of what they are today if we were under a hard money standard like Bitcoin. So my goal is really to just spread education about Bitcoin and help people buy it safely from a company that's not going to sell shitcoins on the same platform, right? So basically Bitcoin Reserve, we help people all over the world buy any amount of Bitcoin except for the United States and Canada. So that's the company.
Oh, okay. So it's outside of the U.S. and Canada that you're serving.
Correct. Yeah, it's similar to Bitfinex. Bitfinex also does not serve U.S. citizens. So
Got it. And so you're currently living in Mexico, right?
I am. Yeah, I've been in Mexico for the last over 3 years now. I moved here in March of 2020 to escape the scam-demic or plandemic or pandemic, whatever you want to call it. But I'm from Los Angeles. I was living there at the time, and I didn't want to be in a Gotham City type environment. And I threw everything in my car, and I drove 2,000 miles south of the border, and have been in Mexico ever since.
Did you go down solo? I know that you mentioned that you're married now. Did you go down solo and you found someone when you were living down there, or did your family come with you?
No, I went down solo. I was a young whippersnapper at the time. So
good for you.
yeah,
How was that adventure? Like you drove from Los Angeles down to Mexico City, or what part of the country?
I went to, so there's a smaller town called San Miguel de Allende, which, by the way, we are Bitcoinizing a lot I have a pretty big announcement that I'll be making at an upcoming Bitcoin conference in Mexico City. I'll be doing a speech there. Moved in a small town called San Miguel de Allende. It's about 2.5 hours outside of Mexico City. Since then I have a wife now. I have a little baby girl now.
Congratulations.
Life has continued smoothly. So,
How do you find the process of Bitcoinizing a Latin American town? Like, do you find that people get it? Do you find that they understand it? I've heard that a lot of these developing countries, they're super enthusiastic for Bitcoin because things work very differently than they do, in a place like America. That they understand more powerfully firsthand, the destructive force of hyperinflation, and they understand more powerfully, like, no, this is mine, and no one can take it from me. Do you find that? What's the process like of bringing people up to speed in a place like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a fascinating question. A few things. So, one, people in Latin America generally have a natural distrust for authority because of they've just been screwed over so many times, and I think Americans also have that too. But it's the feel is a bit different in Latin America, and the corruption is a lot more open.
Yep.
And visible. So, that being said, people, it really depends. The younger generations are a lot more interested in Bitcoin and crypto, unfortunately, compared to the older generations, obviously. That being said, you have a country, Mexico, for example, they experienced hyperinflation in the 90s. Okay, so that's really not that far away. That's 30 years ago, not a long time at all. And so for a lot of people, that memory is very fresh in their head. So bringing up the idea of a form of money that the government can't control, that cannot be inflated past 21 million. There's only 21 million that'll ever exist. A lot of these things do inherently make sense to the people here in Mexico. And plus you have a huge billionaire here named Ricardo Salinas, and everybody knows who that is. He owns a bank here called Banco Azteca. He owns a huge chain of stores called Electra. He owns a company called Total Play, which is like an internet and entertainment company. And all of these companies that he has, they all accept Bitcoin now, except for the bank because of regulatory reasons. So you can literally pay your internet bill in Bitcoin. You can go to Electra and pay for a refrigerator or a washing machine in Bitcoin. And it's all because this billionaire is a Bitcoiner, and when I say Bitcoiner, I don't mean crypto as well. I mean solely Bitcoin. He really gets it. He's on Twitter shit posting all day about it. He's talking about the Illuminati.
Really?
He's a very fascinating character. And I think, he's a billionaire, so you got to be skeptical. And I don't think you can get to that point without shaking a few hands. But that being said, I think the kind of billionaire that he is a bit different in Mexico versus the kind of billionaires that are in the United States. I'm not saying they're all good people in Mexico or anything like that. But the man does speak a lot of truth oftentimes. And it's a gradual process. I mean, like I said, in San Miguel de Allende, we've gotten, I want to say, about 20 businesses now, 15 to 20 businesses accepting Bitcoin. So hotels, restaurants, tourism activities, tourist guides. You can buy art. It's a big art town, so you can buy art in a lot of places with Bitcoin. There's a lot going on.
So you said his name is Ricardo Salinas?
Ricardo Salinas, yeah.
Wow.
And he's got, I think, 10% of his liquid net worth in Bitcoin.
That's really that's encouraging to hear. Although I have a default skepticism towards billionaires, for sure, it is positive to hear that they're making progress, actually bringing it into on the ground economic systems. That it's not just something that's flying around on the internet. It's like, how can I actually make this useful in my day-to-day life? I mean, that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, millionaires are generally people that were high IQ and hardworking and found a way to escape the matrix.
Yeah,
But billionaires are, you should be a bit more skeptical of them. So I agree.
that's interesting. Say more about that. That's I'd never heard that distinction before, but it makes sense to me on an intuitive level.
Yeah, I mean, there's this whole, the left has this idea. It's really envy and jealousy, and it springs from negative emotions. But they think rich people are just somehow inherently bad.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I know I've met a lot of millionaires in my life, and they're all pretty much good people. They employ a lot of people, and they're very intelligent. And most of them I know grew up very poor,
Mm.
with basically nothing. So I've never met any billionaires. I know, you look at like Elon Musk, and on the surface, he seems like some road billionaire that's questioning authority and saying a lot of things people agree with, but I just don't see that at all. I mean, he hasn't run a business without tons of government subsidies, and I just don't think you can get to that level of power without having to be subservient to any authority.
Yeah. That's a really good point. You can't achieve multimillionaire status through hard work and innovation, networking. I think you can do that, but yeah, there's a this different species of billionaire is that's like a thing. I think at that point you become so disconnected from reality almost intentionally. Like it's we hear these words, billionaire, we hear this word floating around, but what does it really mean? What does it translate into the everyday life of an individual, and how do they achieve that rarefied air of having that status? I think the word has connotations, but it's almost impossible to imagine what the everyday life of a billionaire is truly like and how they got there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, definitely completely detached from reality, I would say, as most people know it.
Yeah. So what's the case for someone like a Ricardo Salinas being pro Bitcoin in his businesses, because Bitcoin is so powerfully anti-authoritarian and decentralizing, and it seems like the big thrust of billionaires is to centralize everything.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, a few things. So, one, if you actually do the homework on Bitcoin, you're going to see that it's not going away.
Yeah.
So the way I see it is it's should be akin to the if you can't beat it, join it mentality. That's one aspect. The other aspect is it's not like the man's a central banker, right? I mean, he he owns a lot of hard assets. I know he owns tons of real estate and things like that, which go up in quote value because of inflation, right?
Mm,
Like if you were a real estate investor in Los Angeles in the 1970s and you held property ever since then, you're going to be very rich right now.
yeah.
But it's not like he's losing serious power. I don't think you'd be losing serious power through the money printer or anything like that. Same case goes for politicians too. People often are amazed that we have a lot of politicians in the United States now advocating for Bitcoin because there's historically been this FUD about Bitcoin. Well, the government can just ban it. So there's no point to using it. But politicians also have incentives as well. They want to create local jobs. They want to increase tax revenue without pissing off their people. So that has to be done through larger economic development. And again, it's not like they're the central bankers. It's not like they're the ones losing the power over the digital printing press that we have today.
Hmm.
So, I think it really depends. And plus, just from a pragmatic number go up perspective, if you're a billionaire and you have 10% of your liquid net worth in Bitcoin, that is a lot of money that can go up over time. If you really see how scarce Bitcoin truly is, there's a great website for anybody listening. I recommend checking it out. I think it's called Satoshis per person or Satoshi per person, but it takes the amount of Bitcoin and
Okay.
divides it by the amount of people on Earth today, so about 8 billion. And that's equivalent to about, I think, 0.0 0.02 Bitcoin, which is only about $80 worth of Bitcoin. If you were to take the total supply and give it equally to everybody, that's only about $80 worth of Bitcoin. So this whole idea of I'm too late to Bitcoin or anything like that, it's absolutely nuts. And there's no such thing as being too late to Bitcoin. That's the same thing as me saying that I'm too late to the internet. I'm not going to use the internet because it boomed in the 90s, right? Or I'm too late to the car. Uh, Bitcoin is a long-lasting utility that provides value for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's not a short-term fad. So I think that's a big, important thing for a lot of people to grasp.
Yeah, that's a bunch of the things I was trying to explain to the guys at my church. Like, you can't necessarily think of this as a short-term investment property. It's a little bit different. Your mindset has to be different for it. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to kill. The game theory just does not work out in favor of doing that. You have to shut off the internet. There are choke points, but you can get around them. And it's like, to see the way, was it you? Maybe it was you. I think it was you that posted the Dunning-Kruger effect applied to Bitcoin. Was that your tweet? Yeah, I sent that to the guys that I was talking to. Like, here you go. This is
Nice.
not that I'm accusing you guys of Dunning-Kruger, but this is kind of the pattern of, like, from not understanding it to, like, wait, there's more here. No way. Wait, yes. Oh my gosh, I better get into this right now. And that takes between like 5 and 20 hours, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the process takes years to, I mean, for most people, they hear about Bitcoin, they don't really do anything, and then they hear about it again, and then they maybe read about it a little, and then they buy some, but they also buy other cryptocurrencies because they want to, quote, diversify, and then they almost always lose a bunch of money on the other cryptocurrencies, and they start reading about why Bitcoin only, and it's a really long process to see why. And I understand why somebody would want to diversify too. It makes sense from a traditional portfolio management perspective. But you start looking at all of these other cryptocurrencies, and they have absolutely none of the qualities that Bitcoin does. So, and plus, the idea of I think Christians have a fear of Bitcoin because they can compare it to like the mark of the beast or the one world system and stuff like that. And from a Christian perspective, that's understandable. But practically speaking, it is actually a huge inconvenience to have all these different forms of money. You go travel and you have to do a foreign exchange, and I believe the foreign exchange market is a $6 trillion a day industry. And there's literally no value being provided whatsoever in that industry. It's just changing different forms of money. So the idea of having one form of money, which is not nationally restricted, makes absolute sense. And it's actually very good for people because they can send money to family members overseas. They don't have to worry about anybody censoring a transaction. They don't have to worry about foreign exchange. It actually helps people in a very large way. So.
That's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the things I was explaining to these guys was the difference between Bitcoin and crypto is that these other crypto projects are also heavily centralized. Like Ethereum is running on Amazon servers, for example, whereas Bitcoin is decentralized all throughout the world. Yet the mark of the beast is the whole point behind that, which I think is a shared fear that many have just in general, even outside the Christian world, is that they can just shut off your money if you don't want to play ball, if you don't want to put the pinch of incense. But you actually can't do that with Bitcoin at all. Like, you can't shut off. You're going to shut off all of Bitcoin, or you're going to shut off the entire decentralized network. So it's very anti-mark of the beast by its very construction.
It is. You look at China, and China's banned Bitcoin like 5 times. They're one of the most powerful governments in the world. And now they're even talking about, relinquishing the recent laws that they put in place the last couple of years. But a government could ban Bitcoin. That's the thing. Is the question is, oh well, what if the government bans Bitcoin? It's like, which government are we talking about here? Even if the entire United States government bans it, it's still going to survive. It's still going to live. It's still going to be in other countries. That government is basically just banning itself from Bitcoin, which is a horrible idea and will only make the intelligent, rich people move out of your country, and you're gonna make your nation economically damaged. It's and then you look at China too, and it's like, okay, well, what is their relationship like with the internet? It makes sense that they would ban Bitcoin and implement CBDCs and have this great firewall of China, but that's not an American thing to do. America was the birth of the internet. America has all these tech companies. America's founded around freedom of speech, all these things. So the idea of the US government banning it is just not feasible at this point, especially when you take into consideration what many politicians have been saying about it in the last few years. I'll give one example. Is we made a website, my company, Bitcoin Reserve, called theyownbitcoin.com. Theyownbitcoin.com. And what it is a list of over 100 notable individuals who own Bitcoin and advocate for it. So it's anything from corporate executives to politicians, and the names on that list are quite impressive. There are tons of U.S. politicians that advocate for it, own it. Ted Cruz is one out of many that personally owns it, and Gary Gensler, chairman of the SEC, has publicly stated that Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency he feels comfortable labeling as a commodity. So it's the same classification that gold is under. Gold is also a commodity. So it's pretty interesting to see how Bitcoin has progressed in the United States specifically.
One of the things that I pointed out to these guys was that when they ask Bill Gates what he thinks about Bitcoin, he always gives these neutral answers. And I think part of that is because if he says he's against Bitcoin, all the Bitcoiners will go, yes, and they'll go buy. And if he says he's for it, then all the normies will go for it. So he maintains a neutral posture because we have a naturally more anti-authoritarian perspective in America, while many people do. Right. And so it'll be very difficult for the government to just ban Bitcoin. Like, what would that even look like? I guess they could compromise the on ramps and off ramps, but there's always going to be ways around that.
Absolutely, there are, and I mean, but it would be horrible if the government did ban Bitcoin. I mean, we all know what happened with marijuana when the government banned it. Nobody smokes weed anymore. So
that's what completely went away. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Rest
I'm
in
not
peace,
advocating
marijuana.
for smoking weed, by the way. I think weed is not good, but
I know.
just saying.
Yeah. If the government ever wants to make something spread, just declare a war on it, like the war on drugs or something like that. That's the surefire way. Yeah. And I don't think that there's the political will to really do it anyway. Like we can barely pull together, a functioning government now. I don't think banning Bitcoin is ever going to be high on the government's list of priorities.
No, it makes much more sense for, at this point, the government to just embrace it. I mean, maybe when Bitcoin first came out, they could potentially do something because it was Satoshi and a few other cypherpunk nerds on the internet talking about this thing and running the software and all that. But at this point, it is just not feasible in any way.
So you think it's ultimately just going to spread to the point where it just starts really squeezing the Federal Reserve? Like, because I started out saying that, right now there seems to be this lull. Like there was a moment where Bitcoin was not too long ago where a lot of stuff was happening. And now it's like, what is the next phase? What is the next step? Like clearly it's stabilized. I'm trying to figure that out for myself. Like it just seems like it could just spread, but the people are still talking about, it's going to go to 1 million and all that stuff. Like, it doesn't really matter. I'm more interested, like, how are we going to replace the money system? Do you just see like a slow spread from here, or what's the moment that we're experiencing in Bitcoin right now from your eyes?
Well, I mean, that's kind of in the territory of price, and I never try and talk about price because everybody is wrong when they talk about the price. But I mean, how do I think Bitcoin adoption could play out? It's a theoretical question, but you look at the history of other fiat currencies, and they typically end with hyperinflation. So I personally don't think the United States is going to be experiencing hyperinflation anytime soon. I used to be in kind of the doom crowd, Peter Schiff, gold bug mentality, like we're going to have hyperinflation, you better buy gold, all this stuff. But I think there's still huge demand for the dollar, and especially in Latin America, you see it everywhere. You can pay in dollars anywhere. Not anywhere, excuse me, but you can pay for a lot of things in Latin America with dollars. But so I mean, hyperinflation is also, it's not out of the realm of possibility at some point. So that's one way. And when that happens, what usually happens, I mean, this happened in Mexico when they had hyperinflation in the 90s. They'll phase in a new currency, phase out the old currency, and say, okay, well, the old currency is redeemable for this amount in the new currency. People are still screwed, but they just have a new currency that wasn't, quote, hyperinflated.
Right.
So that's one option, but under that circumstance, having a hard asset like Bitcoin or even gold, I think gold is getting demonetized, especially with the millennial generation inheriting tons of wealth over the next 10 years. But having hard assets, even, like tobacco or bullets or coffee or just things that are very hard to produce that a lot of people want, right? That's a good idea to have under hyperinflation. The other possibility is that it's just a slow process. I recently, about a month and a half ago, made a presentation titled "Why Bitcoin Beats Gold by 2030," and I talked about how the millennial generation is set to inherit a very large amount of wealth over the next 10 or so years. By 2030 is really a big turning point. So Coldwell Banker, if I'm remembering correctly off the top of my head, Coldwell Banker did a study. They estimate that the millennial generation will inherit about $84 trillion from the baby boomer generation. And then another study, I forget who did the study, but another study found it was going to be about 65 or 70 trillion. But you got the point. It's going to be a lot of wealth that the millennial generation inherits. And when you take into consideration the sentiment that the millennial generation has compared to the baby boomer generation on Bitcoin, it is quite astounding. So I know DeVere Group did a study. They found that 2/3 of millennials prefer Bitcoin over gold. There was another study, I think, by the Tokenist, is the source I put in my presentation. But the Tokenist found that in their studies, and which were about 5,000 participants in 18 different countries, found that the amount of millennials compared to baby boomers who prefer Bitcoin over gold is 10 times larger.
Wow.
Okay. So you look at these numbers and it doesn't take a genius to see, okay, well, there's going to be a massive wealth transformation by approximately the year 2030. And the generation that is inheriting trillions of dollars is a lot more warmed up to Bitcoin than the previous one. So that alone could be just a generational shift, could really change a lot.
That's a pretty astounding observation, actually, because I'm just kind of, I think, like many people living in this default mindset that baby boomers are clearly going to live forever. So, but that is a good point that that there will be that shift, and I hadn't actually considered the massive amount of wealth transfer that would take place during that. It also makes sense why all the pushing for like death taxes and inheritance taxes, because that was going on not too long ago. And now I understand why, because some very smart people were looking at this and saying, well, there's a lot we can skim off of that wealth transfer.
Right. Yeah, there is. But, I mean, that's the thing about Bitcoin is it's not like real estate or stocks or anything like that. You can just take your Bitcoin to a different country, which is not going to scrape away at the money your parents were trying to pass down to you and things like that. So, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic. We're moving into a world where, previously governments could clamp down on their citizens because they were geographically restricted. They own property, they own businesses, etc., in their nations. And now with the birth of the internet and the native currency of the internet, which is Bitcoin, people can vote with their feet and go where they're treated best. So it's going to change the role of power a lot.
Can we talk about central bank digital currencies for a second?
Sure. Yeah.
So one of the things that a lot of people have been pointing out is that Whole Foods now has palm scanners as an option for paying. I don't know if you've seen that or seen posts about that, but my local Whole Foods has a palm scanner. It was like, even the checkout person was like, if you want to use this, and I was like, hell no. I said it just like that. That's the only way to respond to something like that. But it raises the point that most of our transactions these days are digital. Who uses coins anymore? In fact, there was a video, I think it was out of the UK, of an old man who went to a grocery store. An older man went to a grocery store and was paying in cash, exact change, and they wouldn't accept his exact change. So he left it on the counter and walked out and was talking about tyranny and all that. I was like, good for that guy. But I think people can see the slow digitization of money, and central bank digital currencies are not that far away. So let's talk about that for a second as like, okay, maybe that could be a path to adoption. Like we can all see this happening, right? We can all see that all of our money is going digital. Fed coin, I think, I don't even know if it was a real thing. It looked pretty real, but how that's going to play out over the next 5 to 10 years, or if is it going to be one big push? Go ahead.
Yeah. So you have, well, the Fed coin thing. I mean, the majority of countries in the world today either are talking seriously and developing plans to implement a central bank digital currency, or already have implemented a central bank digital currency. I know this was about 8 months ago, 9 months ago, something like that. The U.S. announced a new system called Fed Now, which is basically an instant payment system. So, right now, if you want to make a wire transfer, it's going to take ridiculously long for the other party to receive the money. Should take 24 to 72 hours or even longer than that. Fed Now is similar to, in Europe, what they have is called SEPA Instant. It is actually a convenient system. SEPA Instant is not, they don't have their own CBDC attached to it. And it is a quicker form of payment. So, and I know that because, our Bitcoin reserve is based in Europe. And if somebody uses SEPA Instant, you're going to receive the money instantly, right? So you don't have to wait several days. That being said, people are skeptical about Fed Now and SEPA Instant because that should be potentially laying the groundwork for some kind of CBDC, or preparing people for it, rather. But, ultimately the question is this good or bad for Bitcoin? And I personally think it's good for Bitcoin. I don't think people are going to want to live in a world like China has, where you're geographically restricted if you ask the wrong questions about the government, and you can only buy certain things. And I think that's a horrible dystopia. So especially in America, are people going to want to live in that world? No, they're not. America has inherently a freedom-loving culture. And if we are moving into a world where things are becoming digitized, whether or not that is bad or good is a different question. But that's the reality, is that's the world we're moving into. Then do you want to use the form of money that's going to restrict your freedom or enable your freedom? And it's a pretty obvious answer. So I think CBDCs are only going to increase Bitcoin adoption over time. So, and I'm not even sure that who knows if a CBDC is even going to be launched. I know they've talked about it, but you had last year, I believe it was about a year ago, you had a Federal Reserve president of the Bank of Minneapolis, was it? His name's Neil Kashkari, and he basically said that, I understand why a CBDC would be launched in China, but I don't see why everybody's talking about it right now in the United States. It's not an American. It's not an American act. And it was pretty interesting to hear a Fed president say that. I don't think he's this great guy or anything like that, but maybe he let just some truth slip out there. But a CBDC would be very anti-American, and our money today is already anti-American. If you look at Article here, Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution that I'm holding in my hand, says that our money should be coined from gold and silver, and that is not what we have today. So the money we're using is technically unconstitutional.
Oh, deeply so. And you can feel it. Like the book Thank God for Bitcoin lays out the moral case for why fiat currency is so corrosive across all aspects of society. I remember I read it and I was like, I could just see fiat everywhere, fiat everything, fiat everywhere. And you feel the ways it's like, oh, if we can just print endless money with no essential value and people think that it's spending it, why not just give it away into absolutely useless projects and useless things and watch people overindulge themselves, and not to mention governments and corporations overindulge themselves on this meaningless currency? What does that do to our society as a whole? It rots it. It rots it right from the center.
Yeah, 100%. You just go on the website, WTF happened in 1971.com, and you see all these crazy things like birth rates are drastically lower. The age that people are getting married is way higher. Fatherless homes increased. All these signs of societal decay have noticeably increased since 1971, when the United States got off of the gold standard. And there's no coincidence there.
No, especially because no-fault divorce was first signed into law in 1969, which was by Ronald Reagan in California. And so no-fault divorce, for those listening who don't know what that is, it means that either party of a marriage can just end the marriage contract without reason, without fault, not because of abuse or infidelity or anything like that. You can just decide, like, oh, I just want to get a divorce, and just end the marriage contract. And so that's why women initiate something like 80% of divorces. And something like college-educated women, like 90% of divorces, something like that. It's crazy. Yeah. It's the same. Mm-hmm. It's the same kind of thing. That's why you get single motherhood, fatherless homes, etc. Like all these things are tied to the late 1960s, as well as abortion and everything. It's a disaster. Thanks, boomers.
It is. Yeah, it is a disaster. Yeah, thanks, boomers. Yeah. Listen, I mean, I know the tweet I put out was saying I'm no longer a Christian, but I still agree with Christians on a ton of societal issues. Like I think abortion is horrible. I think divorce is horrible. I think, I don't want a society full of broken families. I agree with Christians on a lot of issues pertaining to morality and society.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's jump into it. Let's talk about the tweet. So first, I just want to say, like, what inspired it? Because you said, I have it pulled up here. I've been meaning to post this for a while. Here we go. I am no longer a Christian. So, and so I've read it. I've read through it, and I think there are a lot of good things that I think you say in there. A lot of really important things that you surface in there, and that's why I reached out, because I think you raised some very good points. But one of the things that stood out to me has been meaning to post this for a while. So clearly you'd been thinking on it, sitting on it, ruminating on it, and you just decided to like send it. Like how long is a while, and when did the process start for you to begin asking these questions?
I would say 9 months or so, give or take. Okay. And I'll tell you what, do you mind if I just read this tweet for your listeners, in case nobody's read it? I think it'll lay out a good groundwork and take just a couple minutes.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so here's the tweet. Been meaning to post this for a while. Here we go. I'm no longer a Christian. I've always pursued truth and can't force myself to believe things that don't make sense to me. There is no religion higher than truth. And then I put a quote by Mark Twain, which is, the best cure for Christianity is reading the Bible. Mark Twain said that. I grew up Christian. I went to Christian preschool, elementary school, middle school, and high school. Many people believe Christian ideology is good for society, but I simply do not think that anymore. Tenets of Christianity are the perfect recipe for making docile citizens. It's extremely demeaning to both yourself and your ancestors to believe that we wouldn't have morality if it weren't for a certain book, that your ancestors didn't have morality until Catholics came and forced everyone to convert. Obviously, stealing, murdering, etc. are wrong. Every culture / ethnicity had their own gods. My European ancestors, and yours too, Will, had their own gods, plus traditions, cultures, and customs. It is truly sad that my ancestral beliefs, cultures, and traditions have been completely lost as a result of being forced to worship somebody else's god, Yahweh. It makes a hell of a lot more sense to pray to my ancestors than praying to Yahweh. Christianity is the original trust the plan, where you do nothing. Love your enemy, hate your family, don't care about this world. Someone will come and save you. A defeatist mentality. Luke 14:26 literally says, hate your family. Jesus said, if anybody comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And I said, now watch all the Christians cope and say I'm taking it out of context. I think Christians are often good, well-intentioned people. I just can't force myself to believe things that don't make sense to me. I tried. Here's the truth, whether you admit it or not. Nobody knows what happens when you die. I'm okay with that. Maybe we're not supposed to know. People get comfort in the idea of feeling like they have the answers. What happens when you die? What to do to be in a good place afterwards? I don't believe I don't believe I deserve hell for being honest with myself, and the reality is that nobody has any clue, and there is no religion higher than truth. So that's effectively a brief summary of why.
Okay. So again, I think you raise a lot of important points. I think the thing that stands out to me from the overall character of the tweet is a sense of moral outrage. And I don't necessarily mean towards Christianity, although there is that in there. I think that there's a frustration with the way things are, socially, politically, economically, etc. And I think the response is like, what does Christianity have to say about it? What is Christianity doing about it? Nothing. And so, this can't be true, or this can't be accurate because of the outrage over you guys are supposed to be the ones fixing all these things and you're doing nothing. And so perhaps there's a lie somewhere behind there. That was the overall character that I took, in addition to all the individual points that you brought up. So I absolutely get it, and I'll leave it up to you where you'd like to start working your way through this, like what you feel has the most energy, because I've given some thought to it. So, but this is your response. So you tell me, like, what's the most important aspect of that to you, or where would you like to begin?
I think one quote by Nietzsche is potentially a good place to start. Nietzsche said, "Faith is not wanting to know what is true." And I mean, again, there is the fact that nobody has any idea what happens when you die. You can believe you know something that happens when you die, but nobody really knows. And it's additionally, it is an extremely difficult position to be in that I have basically publicly put myself in, because you and I basically don't know each other outside of this podcast, but like
Right.
I want to search for the truth. Like I want to be an honest person with myself and with the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have bad intentions here. And
Exactly. I don't feel that.
I love a lot of Christians too. Like I don't, it's not like I hate Christians or all these things, but it's a horrible perspective to have on a person that if they no longer have your beliefs, they're being influenced by Satan, which is effectively like, that is the Christian view of me right now, is that I'm lost. I've been deceived. I am under the influence of Satan. It's a horrible thing to perceive somebody else who doesn't have your viewpoints. And it's also, you got to think about the incentives. If as a Christian, you don't want to lose your faith, because if there's a fear of losing your faith, because you have the fear of what happens when you die. And if you lose your faith, I mean, from the Christian point of view, you're probably going to end up in hell from the Christian point of view. Now, I know modern Christianity now it's kind of stating that you might not go to hell if you're not a Christian, right? But historically speaking, that's been the case, and I would say many to most Christians still believe that you are going to hell if you're not Christian. And that's a scary thing for a lot of people, and I think it's a very effective way to get people to not ask questions. And, you can ask questions, that's fine, but if you come to a different conclusion, or if things don't make sense to you, then, you're not one of us. And the thing that really frustrated me too is, and you had this response too, a lot of people were telling me I was never a true Christian, which I'm sorry, it's absolute bullshit. I was a very devout Christian. I've read a lot of the Bible. I grew up in that environment. I really did believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and he came here to save us and die for our sins and all these things. But I just do not believe this anymore. And I've read, I've been very in touch with the Christian point of view. I have a previous friend of mine where, I was asking these questions with him, and basically I wasn't getting a satisfactory answer. And I got a book recommended to me called the case for Christ, which you hear a lot of Christians talk about the case for
Lee
Christ.
Strobel, right?
Yeah, by Lee Strobel. You probably have it right there, right? Yeah.
It's right up there.
It's not a compelling book to me. I'm sorry. I read the whole freaking book. It's not compelling to me. I don't think the contemporary evidence of the alleged life of Christ is compelling in any way. And even if that information in the case for Christ is legitimate, even if we do have contemporary sources for the life of Christ, which are long after Christ allegedly lived, I mean, am I going to hell or heaven dependent on my historical interpretation of something? I mean, is that really like the foundation of this belief where, if I just perceive history a different way, then I'm going to hell forever? I think that's just, I think that's abhorrent. I've kind of thrown a lot out there, so I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so
I've got
there's
a lot more, but I don't want to keep going on forever.
Oh, for sure, I completely get it. So there's a lot that's wrapped up in there, and there are a lot of different pieces to kind of pull apart that sort of get to the nature of the argument. So I think the first thing that I want to pull on is that the Christians, truly devout and believing Christians, I think, and I'm so first of all, I'm not Catholic. I'm from the Reformed Protestant tradition, Reformed theology. I think you might really like Reformed theology. I think Reformed theology is absolutely capable of answering every single one of your questions and then some for a lifetime. So many Christians who grow up, so we'll call them nominally Christian, meaning like Christian families, Christian practices, etc. They're part of some non-denominational church, right? Rather than usually in America, like some form of Baptist or Pentecostal or something like that, or charismatic. Now, Reformed theology is very, very different. It's what you might have heard described as Calvinism. That's a theological position, not necessarily a denomination. Reformed theology stands in contrast also to Roman Catholicism, which you mentioned in the tweet. And so the position that I'm standing in is a Reformed theological position, which I think can answer many of your questions. So the first thing is the question of why to believe. I don't think that telling people that you're going to hell if you don't believe is a compelling reason. I think it was effective for, particularly in America, with the sawdust and tears revivalism, where America was spreading westward, and they were so concerned with winning souls over to Christ that they scared them into the hands of a loving God. That's actually what happened. But I don't know that that necessarily works for people who want to look past the emotional arguments for something, right? It's like, okay, there's obviously, and so we're clear. I don't interpret any bad intent in those tweets at all. You weren't, for example, blaspheming, the Holy Spirit or blaspheming God. You weren't putting up pictures of all these sacrilegious, terrible things of Christ. You're just saying, I have questions and I want these questions answered. I think that's a very good thing. And that's why I responded the way that I did, because I consider you asking questions from a sincere place. And so that's a man that I can communicate with about it. And so I think you're right in that scaring people with the image of hell and in order to get them to behave is a caricature of Christianity. And I don't think that's what Christianity truly is. In fact, I know that's not what it is. What Christianity truly is a heart transformation. I believe it's in Ezekiel. I will take from you this heart of stone and I will give to you a heart of flesh. Sanctification and regeneration, where you become reconciled to God and your interests change organically from the inside out. You do it out of love for God, not fear of hell. And the way that Christianity often gets portrayed in America, particularly culturally, is behave or else you'll go to hell. That's not what Christianity is. What Christianity is a love for God that leads to a heart transformation and a new sets of behavior that leads you closer to God and further away from hell.
What do you think happens to somebody that has heard the message story of Jesus and rejects it when they die?
The story of Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, somebody that's been exposed to, I'm not talking about some random kid in Africa that's never heard about Christianity. Somebody that grew up in America, had the quote opportunity to accept Jesus and denies Jesus.
So from the reform theological perspective, in Adam, right, during original sin, all of humanity fell. Right, all of humanity fell when Adam sinned, and from that point forward, every single person for humanity deserved hell. Right, instantly. That was the fall.
I gotta chime in here. I already think that alone is a horrible worldview. I really do. I don't think that. Yeah, I think it's
So what
there's
part?
this theme in Christianity of I'm not worthy and we're just inherently bad. I don't think that's true at all. I don't think we're inherently perfect either, but I think it's a very demeaning worldview to have. And it's very different from the religion of, or the beliefs that our ancestors had. Paganism is seen as like a horrible, dirty word that's associated with child sacrifice and all that stuff. But if you actually read Nordic mythology and look into that worldview, they did absolutely none of that. And the idea of getting on your knees and begging God for something and thinking you're unworthy is very looked down upon. And
you don't have to. This is the thing: is there is no amount of begging that we can do to bring us into reconciliation with God. And so my background. I think this will be really important. I did not grow up Christian. I grew up Jewish. Actually, I was bar mitzvahed. Went to Israel, everything, and then I spent 20 years exploring religion and spirituality around the world. I've traveled to more than 30 countries, been to religious festivals, ayahuasca, China, India, etc. So I explored all the world religions. I've done Buddhist meditation in the mountains and in Kashmir. So I've done all the things, right? So I can speak.
You got red hair and blue eyes, man. I wouldn't have thought you grew up Jewish. Interesting.
Well, we could talk about that.
Yeah.
So I want you to know that all of these perspectives, that I lived in them for a very long period of time. So, for example, the central challenge of original sin is that we are wicked at our core. That if you go down far enough, you will find some essential corruption within us as beings. Right now, that's what original sin says. We could talk about total depravity. This notion that sin affects all aspects of our being. That doesn't mean that we are all criminals. Right? That doesn't mean that we're all psychopaths. But it means that at the core of all of us is a deceitful, wicked heart that we struggle against through our whole lives. Okay, that's the Christian perspective. From the New Age perspective, which I would define as the broad scope of religion that's outside of Christianity, it's that we're essentially good, and our systems make us bad. Our world makes us bad. And if we just express ourselves more and more freely and more clearly, we will reveal our essential goodness. So these two perspectives are in opposition to each other. And what I can tell you is I lived for a very long period of time believing that people were essentially good at their core. In fact, believing that about myself. And that doesn't mean that that at the core of me that I'm a psycho killer waiting to come out. Right. But what it means is when I took a real honest look at myself and I saw the ways that I was behaving in contradiction to my own values and my own stated goals, despite myself, that no matter what I did, I could never force myself to perform, think, feel, act in a 100% moral way. That was when I understood the truth of original sin, that we struggle against our own innate wickedness that we will never overcome under our own strength. And that stood in stark contradiction, which says, if I just try hard enough, I will release my essential goodness and become a good person, right? A perfectly good person. These two things are going in absolute opposite directions. And it's very difficult. It was very difficult for me to be honest with myself about my own wickedness. But when I was finally able to get there and recognize that, that was when I realized that salvation is available for that. And that's why it exists. That is the message. It's not that, again, we're all psycho killers and we need God to come in and rescue us from being like psychopaths, right? It's that within ourselves we struggle against this aspect that never lets us be as moral as we're capable of being. And that's what we need Jesus to help us accomplish the love of God to help us accomplish.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't. Yeah, I don't have that belief. I mean, human beings have always struggled with good and evil, and we've had different interpretations over time of what good and evil is. But I don't think you
I don't agree with that.
need the God
I
of
don't agree with
Israel
that.
to be a moral person. I mean, we had
No,
morality
I agree with you
before
on that.
Christianity. You look at, I mean, even the word virtue comes from Rome, it means virtus, and we had. There's also this, you know, I know, I believe you're pretty big on Western civilization, and there's this argument that we wouldn't have the West if it weren't for Christianity, and I totally disagree with that. I think the West succeeded in spite of Christianity, and we had virtues, we had morality, we had beautiful architecture, we had all the things the West had before Christianity. And I think that, you know, if you look at the collapse of the Roman Empire, it coincided at the same time as the spread of Christianity, because the beliefs of Christianity were effectively the opposite of the beliefs of the Roman Empire. So I am curious too, just
Well,
so I
that's
know.
so
I have
just to interrupt that real quick. You can read
yeah.
Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which perhaps one of our mutual friends on mutual friends on Twitter, Jim Clare, just finished that entire volume series, and that series goes into quite detail about why it wasn't Christianity that caused the collapse of the Roman Empire. That was far more complicated, and there were more factors to it.
I mean, maybe there were, but I just think if you have society of people that have a warrior culture and they're willing to fight for the world, and you know, they have their own gods that they worship and all these things, that's pretty different from Christianity, which is, I mean, the Bible talks about how you should not fight for this world, how you should fight for the world to come, and you know, you should give away all your possessions. And so I did want to ask you real
all
quick
these things
though.
all those things are not accurate interpretations, but please continue with your question. Like, I get it. I believe me, I understand. And it's a frustration that many people have, is that they believe that Christianity is as it's manifesting today, is a Gnostic religion. In fact, actually,
Okay, John 2:15 through 17. I mean, at what point, I can pull up tons of
yeah, that's
verses, but at
fine.
what point am I taking this out of context? I mean, do you
We'll
not
read
love
it.
the world or the things of the world? If anybody loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him.
For
I
sure.
love this world. I love having material possessions. I need to have material possessions. I have no shame in that. I want to have resources. I will fight for my resources. I will not let anybody conquer me. I will fight for this world. You know, I mean, the
You're allowed to
Bible's.
do that. You are allowed to defend yourself. You're allowed to defend your family. You're allowed to defend your property. You're allowed to defend these things, and you're not supposed to just simply submit yourself to destruction. What we're talking about is the greatest commandment. It's to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of that is also love yourself. Right. So let's be clear. So it's an ordering of affections. That love of God comes first. Right. That's the first thing that you should love. And if you love the material world more than you love God, then your affections are disordered, right? The material world is meant to be enjoyed. Man, woman, we were made to take dominion, be fruitful and multiply. We weren't commanded to just kind of transcend reality and escape this physical prison. That's the Gnostic perspective. The realities we are supposed to tend for, care for, steward this world and enjoy it because it was declared very good. But if you make that enjoyment of the world first and foremost of your life above loving God, then your affections are disordered, and that does lead to destruction.
Yeah, I just can't see how, you know, how does it not change society in a very vast way when you have a group of people, their gods? I mean, first of all, everybody had their own gods, right? I mean, each culture, each ethnicity had their gods, their traditions, their customs. And Yahweh is the jealous God. The God of Israel is the jealous God. And one of the, you know, you have this theme of idol worship throughout the Bible, and it has a negative connotation. But I mean, the Romans were technically idol worshippers because they weren't worshiping the God of Israel. But you know, Yahweh, the jealous God, under the story, obviously, I don't actually believe this, but Yahweh wants everybody to worship him, which involves letting go of your traditions, letting go of your cultures. I find that to be a very sad thing, and I can't help but see how, you know, you have a strong Roman pagan empire focused on warrior culture. You go from worshiping gods that were warriors themselves to a god that literally did not fight back at all and got killed. And I know the you might respond by saying, well, Christ defeated death and all this stuff, but I think that vastly changes society a lot. And I did want to ask too, just out of curiosity, do you have, I mean, you got red hair and blue eyes. Are you 100% Jewish, or are you like half, European
Mm-hmm.
background, or what's
Yeah,
your?
all four of my grandparents were Jewish, so yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So maybe with Nordic mythology, you don't have as much of a connection as I do, but it is. I find it sad that my the way that I viewed my European ancestors. You view your ancestors in a positive way, so do I, right? But there are so many people of European descent, like myself, who view their ancestors like they were just horrible people doing child sacrifices and worshiping idols, and I think that's extremely sad.
I mean,
And it's not true at all. You
I
read the
can,
Poetic Edda, you read old manuscripts of Nordic paganism, and they had strong morality at the time. You had the Roman Empire observing Germanic tribes having monogamous lifelong relationships, right? So you
well,
did have.
you also had some pretty deviant, crazy sexual practices going on as well, all throughout the Greek and Roman empires. Temple prostitution, child sacrifice, abortion. All of these things were allowed, and all of these things were permitted. And I can love my ancestors just like I can love my parents and grandparents, and still say that they were wrong about things. It's not
No,
unloving.
your
It's not
ancestors are
unloving to
different
say
from
that.
mine. You got the
Well,
chosen status though. Your ancestors are
I
different
mean,
from mine. My ancestors are the dirty pagan idol worshippers, right? I mean,
I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would say that. Like go back far enough in anyone's life, and you find the same level of we'll call it uncivilization, right? You don't have to turn back the clock very far. So like whether I root my ancestors in Germany and Russia, and you root yours in Norway or Finland, I don't know that it matters so much. Like I'm capable of looking back on my ancestors wherever they come from and saying like, I'm grateful for you, and there are things about life and reality that you were wrong about, and both those things can live equally and be equally true.
Okay, but the Bible views your ancestors as I would say a higher playing field than mine, because mine were according to the Yahweh point of view, Yahweh worshiping point of view. Mine were idol worshippers. Yours were
That
not.
that's actually not precisely true. I understand what you mean, but in fact, if we take my ancestors as being the Jews, by the time that Jesus came, the Jewish religion had become impossibly corrupt with the Pharisees, and they were given custody beginning with Abraham and going through the patriarchs and then into Moses. They were given custody, carry God's law forward until the time when I fulfill it, right? And that Christ was the fulfillment of the law. And so when Christ came, the Jews had done such a bad job of custodying the law that actually, if you read Romans 9, 10, and 11, you see that God was pretty upset at the Jews, and the Jews were cast off so that Gentiles could be welcomed in. So there's no favoritism going on here at all. In fact, if we call my ancestors the Jews, God was pretty mad at them for not doing a particularly good job, but it wasn't the first time in Bible history where that was the case. So it's not that there's a judgment. In fact, salvation through Christ was a gift. It was a gift extended to the Gentiles, and it wasn't this judgment in the way that you're describing it.
Yeah, I just don't see it that way. I mean, if God wants to save as many people as possible, which I know you believe that He does, then wouldn't He make it more clear? I mean, how is there so
I
much
was watching a video
room
about that today.
if Jesus wants to save everyone, right? Why is there no truly legitimate contemporary information about all of these apparently miraculous things that happen? Why is there so much room for debate? Why would it be so ambiguous? We're talking about God being the king of the universe, then it should be abundantly clear. Okay, this is the case. This is true. This actually happened. I mean, there wouldn't be so much room for interpretation. I find that problematic in itself. Secondly, I'm not saying, I can't speak for, I don't have, Greek ancestry, anything for that. It's not as interesting to me. Same thing with, Jewish ancestry. It's just not my ancestry, right? But I can tell you that these myths that Christians commonly believe about paganism were not the case in Nordic mythology. So they had sexual virtue as well. It's not like women were running around being hoes and men were just having orgies everywhere, and it's really not the way it was. And additionally, the God of Israel is I don't think virtuous. I don't think it's. I mean, how is it virtuous? You're talking about child sacrifice. Didn't God command? Was it Isaac, or either Abraham or Isaac to sacrifice his own son? And then at the very last minute, he said no. But he. I mean, how is that moral in any way to tell somebody to sacrifice their own son? I think that's insane. I also think it's insane to cut part of the penis off of an 8-day-old baby. I don't see how.
I also think that's insane. I'm not in favor of circumcision now.
Right, but the problem is that you affirm that was legitimate at one point in time as a Christian, because you affirm the Old Testament, which has.
Sure, that was appropriate. That was appropriate for God as a sign for His covenant people to be set apart, and that was one of the high prices that they paid to be part of God's promise. It's not
okay. So let's just think about this situation. So Abraham is in the desert, and he hears the voice of God. Like, let's say we're with Abraham. All right, we're in the desert with Abraham, and Abraham comes to us and he says, God told me to cut the tip of the penis off of 8-day-old babies.
The adults had to go through it too.
Okay, I'm not going to be with Abraham after that. I don't know about you, but if someone is telling me I heard a voice in my head and it was God, and I'm going to cut part of the dick off of my baby, and you actually as an adult, I'm not going to associate with that person. But is this really what the king of the we're talking? Is this really what God wants? How does this make any sense?
Right. I mean, I think trying to make God make sense to us is going to be a losing proposition, because God is the creator of the heavens and the earth, and we can't possibly understand Him. And I think that's a big part of the challenge, is that people want to make God make sense to humanity, and it's not possible for that to happen. No, so any more than we can possibly.
We shouldn't use logic or try and have a belief system that makes sense. I mean, we should believe in a God that we've never talked to, we've never seen. We should believe a book written thousands of years ago, which has tons of contradictions. And I mean, how is this not problematic?
Right. So actually, it's funny that you mentioned the contradiction of the Bible. I was actually watching a video about that today from Mike Winger. So the first thing to keep in mind is that God is the creator of heaven and earth, and it's not like and man and woman as well. It's not as if Abraham said, "I just heard this voice in my head." When God wants to communicate with us, He lets us know, and there's not really a whole lot of doubt. So it's not like Abraham was just chilling one day and he had this thought like, "Oh, I think I'll just go sacrifice my son because the voice in my head said so." Abraham was called to go conduct the sacrifice because he was certain in his faithful heart that was what God, the creator of heaven and earth, had commanded him to do. Now, Abraham went up there in faith and fully expected that God would redeem whatever it was. He thought maybe his son would come back to life or whatever. But he did it out of faith in God because, again, the first greatest commandment, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength. Right. And so he knows on some intuitive level that hadn't yet been commanded yet, because that was Christ in the New Testament who spoke those words. But he understood his affections were rightly ordered. And when the creator of heaven and earth and the creator of you commands you to do a thing, you do it in a spirit of faith. Right. Now, the man who did actually sacrifice his son for the good of all was God. God sacrificed his own son.
Yeah. So why does God have to do that? Why, if he's God, shouldn't he be able to just forgive everybody?
But then he wouldn't be just. Why does he have to
kill his own son?
Then he wouldn't be just, because sin requires a sacrifice.
Why does God demand animals to be sacrificed? Why does God want to have animals killed? Because is he not able to just forgive people?
It's not.
To me, this seems like just Bronze Age religion, barbaric practices, superstitions. I think we need to
But I mean,
think about things
you're talking
logically
about
here and just
paganism and
move
God's
on.
word. So what is the standard that we're operating by? Is the standard civilization, like quote unquote civilization, because you said it's Bronze Age, but you want to go back to pagans and
I don't want to
like
go back to paganism.
well, I mean,
I'm just saying that
but you see the
the
standard shifting
understanding
though.
that Christians have of paganism is totally wrong.
Well,
Of Nordic paganism, at
well,
least.
so but if we're talking that what appears to be barbarism is the standard, you're appealing to an equally barbaric but different standard,
I'm not.
right? I mean, like
I'm not at all.
I mean, like these pagans that you're talking about, like
Yeah.
the myth of the noble savage is not and has never been a thing. It has never been a thing. These ideas that these individuals back at the time were somehow more just and noble than we are today, right? And we've just erased their history because of some
That's
Christian
exactly
thing.
what happened. Yeah, paganism was made illegal. Iceland was the last country to have legal form of quote paganism. I mean, it was
Sure.
forced conversion, and our history has been basically erased in many ways. And the remnants that we have of it, the stories that have been passed down in private from people worshiping European gods in their own homes, are not in any way the case of what you are claiming. There was no child sacrifice. There was no, blood orgies, any of this bullshit in Scandinavia.
So
It's not true. Christians just
now
haven't read about it because they're reading
so
the
now
God of Yahweh. They're reading about somebody else's God.
Now we're zeroing in onto what your standard is, because this is what I'm trying to figure out. So you're comparing Christianity to some standard, and you believe that Christianity doesn't meet that standard. So I'm trying to understand what that standard is. So now the standard is pagan peoples in Scandinavia in what century? Like, what time frame are we talking about? Like, this is the standard by which Christianity is being measured by. Let's talk about who these people are. If they are the one solid standard by which everything else can be judged. Who are, like, paint the picture of who they are.
What do you mean they're the one solid standard by everybody else can be judged?
So you are criticizing Christianity because, and particularly in the Old Testament, because it seems barbaric, right? That's a value judgment.
I think the Old Testament has a lot of barbaric things in it, like
absolutely
just
does.
a few things that I mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say to you that so something being barbaric is a standard, something being barbaric is bad. So we want to find a standard, a culture that was not barbaric, and the one that you seem to be proposing as being more righteous and more virtuous and more noble than Jewish or Christian society is this Icelandic culture. So let's talk about who they are and how this Icelandic culture became the standard by which Hebrew culture and Christian culture have been judged. Why is that the standard?
Well, I'm not saying Icelandic culture was, except, well, I think it was. I would prefer to live in Icelandic culture compared to Jewish culture, ancient Jewish culture, for sure. I'm not saying that Icelandic culture today is the standard by. I've never claimed that that's the standard by what everybody should be living by today. I believe that if you're talking about deriving morality out of things, I mean, you commonly hear Christians say, well, how are you going to have, what's your basis for morality if you don't have some kind of foundation? My basis for morality is my brain, just as yours is, and everybody else's basis for morality is their brain.
Yeah, that's a pretty fluid standard, though, right? Because
that's why you have tons of denominations of Christianity and Judaism, and everybody thinks that they're right and everybody else is wrong, and the Catholics are wrong, the Protestants are right, and the Orthodox are, I'm Orthodox, I'm right, everybody else's denomination is wrong. It's because we're all using our own brains, and we have our own subjective opinions.
Right. I think the question about Christian denominations is a little different, because what we're trying to figure out, you and I, is where where any standard for morality comes from beyond subjectivism. So you say that your standard is your brain. Cool, I get that. But the guy who lives,
as is yours, yeah, you're using your brain to believe that the moral standard of the Bible is the proper moral standard, but you're still choosing to do that with your brain.
I mean, I choose to do everything throughout my day with my brain. I don't really mean like I choose to drink this glass of water with my brain, right? But when we're talking about morality, we're talking about a standard that either everyone is held accountable to, which is moral objectivism, or moral relativism, right? So if you're putting forth a standard of moral relativism where what Andrew Howard's brain says is true and good and right is what's true and good and right, right? And so what if the guy next to you, I don't know, whatever his name is, he has a different set of standards? How do you decide who is true, whose moral standard is true and good and right between the two of you? Especially if you get into conflict, right? Where like is because his standard is true and good and right, does that make it true and good and right? Because his stands directly in contradiction to yours.
Yeah, that's the debate that human beings have been having since the dawn of our inception. And morality has changed. What is commonly understood as morality has changed throughout society as well over time. Even in the Bible, King Solomon had like 700 wives, and today
He
that's
was
not more.
punished for that. He was punished for that very badly.
Okay, well,
In fact, he was
there are
punished.
a lot of
He
godly
lost
figures
his
in the
father's.
Bible who had multiple wives. Morality has even changed throughout the Bible as well.
I
You
don't.
even
I
mentioned
don't.
yourself with circumcision. So morality is off. It's basically
I mean, I didn't. I
societally
couldn't make that
dictated.
choice. I wasn't.
Morality,
Yeah. Go
morality
ahead.
is dictated by what society collectively agrees,
Okay.
and
So
the use of force is completely contingent upon what we believe morality is. If somebody believes it's moral to go kill and rape a bunch of babies, eventually that person should and probably will be killed themselves because society believes that that is wrong.
right, but
So
if an entire
everybody,
society,
we
if an
have
entire society
general
is
things that we commonly agree upon, like rape is wrong, murder is wrong, things like this. We have general thing. I mean, we also have, I think, unless you're an absolute psychopath, you think those things are wrong. And I don't think you need an ancient, bush to have that understanding. I mean, I think it's almost like denying. I think it's very denigrating to yourself, actually, that you would just go murder and kill people if you didn't have the Bible. I think that's not okay. And there are a
I,
lot of people who aren't religious who also still have morality and monogamous relationships and families and.
mm-hmm, absolutely. So I want to paint another picture for you, but just to check and see if what society determines as moral, if that's really true. So if we draw an imaginary circle around and create a country in the middle of nowhere, pick wherever in the world, and this society determines that it's right to kill and eat babies. Now they've collectively determined that amongst themselves. Does that make killing? In fact, if 100% of people on Earth decide that killing and eating babies is the way to go, does that make killing and eating babies right?
No.
It doesn't. So, okay, so there's an objective standard for morality. Because if 100 people on Earth, 100% of the people around the world determine that killing and eating babies is right, it's still wrong, then there's a standard for morality that exists outside of what people determine is true.
Well, the people that theoretically in this situation believe that it's okay to kill babies, they would also believe that their subjective version of morality is objective, right?
I mean, but we're asking a question about this hypothetical society. Like, does society collectively, unilaterally get to determine morality, or does it come from someplace else?
Just because 100% of people agree something is right doesn't mean it's right. I don't.
Good, that's the right answer. I like that. That's
Okay.
right. Yeah, exactly. Okay,
but they're going to believe that it's right. They believe it's objectively right.
I mean,
so it is subjective. So
I mean,
whoever has the biggest sword and can dictate morality is the one who's going to dictate morality.
So morality is dictated by power.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
It always has been.
But I don't know that we necessarily want a world where that is true, because I don't believe it is.
That's what happened with Christianity. That's what happened with your worldview. Is it was forced upon people.
And that I don't agree with, because I don't believe that's how Christianity should spread, but I don't get to determine the course of history. Christianity spreads by changing people's hearts, by, as I started the conversation, saying, I will take from you a heart of stone and give to you a heart of flesh. That's how Christianity is meant to spread. Faith comes through hearing. You hear the gospel and have an inner heart transformation that makes you desire God. Now, Roman Catholicism being essentially an ecclesiological monarchy, right, that spread like any other empire, that was the unfolding of history. But I don't believe it necessarily created the kind of mass conversion that it claims that it did. It didn't create heart transformation in people. Perhaps in some that it did, but I don't believe that's how Christianity is meant to spread. But then again, we're also getting into another contradiction of your own stated values, where if morality is created by power, well, Christianity was pretty powerful and conquered the world. So why is it bad? The most powerful religion, it conquered your people, right? So like, why is it suddenly bad that it conquered your own people? Shouldn't you be celebrating the destruction of your people by a more powerful force?
That's just like saying the U.S. government is good because they've conquered much of the Middle East.
Well, I mean, if you're saying that power determines morality, then like if something's powerful, then congratulations, they've
Whoever
just
has the
determined
most
morality.
amount of power will dictate in society what is moral. That doesn't mean that it's actually moral, but that is
Okay,
often how society widely recognizes morality is
so
because who has the most amount of power.
that's also, well, what you just said is also that how we recognize immorality, right? It's how we recognize immorality. It's like, wait a minute. If I say
Oh, we're
that
breaking
this
up.
large, powerful organization is doing something that I regard as immoral, like conquering the Middle East, but they're powerful by virtue of power being the highest morality, then what they're doing is moral. But if we can look at it and say that's immoral, where does that sense of morality come from if not power? Where else is it coming from?
Again, from my do you think that people who aren't Christian are just going to go out and, I mean, under this logic, people who aren't Christian have no morality. They're going to go murder babies. They're going to be in this hypothetical. So
I
do you
don't agree.
not think that we inherently, generally speaking, have an awareness of morality?
I do.
Like
And the question that I'm asking is, where does that come from?
I don't know. I mean, I would say my
I
brain,
do.
because my brain is what dictates. You don't know. You
I
have
do.
absolutely no idea. You don't know anything. You have no idea. You have no idea what happens when you die. You've never talked to
That's not important to
this
me. I
God
mean,
that you believe in. You've never met anybody who's seen this God. You don't know. You
I
have the
mean,
same amount of knowledge that I do. The difference is I don't believe you're going to hell because you don't have my belief system. That's the difference, which I would say
it's
is immoral to have that belief system.
um. So why is
And
it
it's
immoral?
incontrovertible to say that whoever has the most amount of power can dictate what society generally recognizes as morality. That's if you disagree with that, you're arguing with literally all of human history. And just because somebody is powerful doesn't mean their version of morality is correct. But you can get society to believe that your version of morality if you can force people to conduct their life in your belief system.
So if can something be moral if it isn't correct? Can you have I mean, like, yes, you can technically call it a moral system, but a behavior that is immoral cannot by nature be correct. Yeah, it's a moral system in some sense, but it's not truly moral with a capital M.
Can something be moral if it's, I think you're getting, see, this is the
Well, we're
problem with
talking
Christian.
about
You're getting way too much into the semantics. How your moral foundation is, you don't, I don't think anybody truly knows where this comes from. You can say that you can believe that but you don't know. You're
I mean
using your brain just like I am, and you also have no idea what happens when you die. It's the opposite of
I'm
Bitcoin. Bitcoin is don't trust, verify.
mhm.
Christianity, Abrahamic religions, all religion, including Nordic mythology, is trust, don't verify. I mean,
It's
how is this
faith.
not a blatant
It's
contradiction?
That's faith, because we're talking about two different things. We're talking about the things that are unseen, the immaterial realm, right? Which can't be seen with the eyes. Faith comes by hearing, right? It doesn't come by seeing, right? So we're talking about two different things. So faith in the material world versus faith in we might say the immaterial world, the higher reality, the things of spirit. That's a matter of faith. You can verify what's physically real, but faith comes by hearing. It as an inward experience of transformation, of seeing the places that are not made with hands.
Okay. I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm not going to believe in something that I can't see and have really no idea about. I mean,
But you do all but
are
we do
there
all the time.
is there a spirituality to this? I mean, I don't think life is without purpose. I love life. I think life
Mm-hmm.
has meaning, and there's it's probably some some stuff going on that we can't see. I'm not going to argue with that, but I don't think I deserve hell because I'm not you know, I don't have your belief system and it just doesn't make sense to me. Do you believe that I'm going to hell? Like, just without some long drawn out answer, like, do you believe that because I don't have your belief systems I'm going to hell?
I'll give you the short answer and say yes.
Okay,
But
that's horrible. That's very messed up.
well, okay. So what happened? What
And
happens to me? What happens to me
this
when
is
I
another
die?
thing. It's like Christianity. It's like your
But I'm not
life
judging
does
you.
not. Yeah, you are.
I'm
100% you are.
not.
This is
I'm not. I'm not
yeah,
sitting here
you are.
saying no. I'm not. I'm not
Yeah,
sitting here saying that
you are
you're.
using your brain to believe that the moral system you believe in, which with your brain you believe in, that is okay for somebody to go to hell.
I'm
Who
not telling.
doesn't
You're not
have
going
this
to hell.
story in their head that doesn't make sense to them.
I'm not the one condemning you there. I just so you know that. And the reason why I'm
But you
having this,
believe it's okay.
I believe it's morally required.
Okay, but yes, so exactly. So you
Hell
believe
is
it's
morally
okay that I'm
required.
going to hell because I don't believe in a God that doesn't make sense to me and that I've never seen and that I can't prove.
Well, so let's talk about the moral requirement of hell. Like we have to talk
Okay.
about, okay, hell is morally required because if hell doesn't exist, then every bad person on earth who ever did anything bad gets away with it. Hitler got away with it, or pick Stalin. Stalin got away with it, right? All the lizards at the Federal Reserve, they get away with it. They just die and they're happy. Congratulations.
You know, it would be really great if we didn't have this ideology where people think something, accountability happens when you die because nobody has any idea what happens when you
Yeah,
die. It would
that'd
be
be
great
amazing.
if we actually had a belief system where this world was worth fighting for and you made these evil people have accountability today in this world.
I
That
would
would be
love to
awesome.
be in that
But
world.
unfortunately, we live in a world where the majority of people trust the plan and they think Jesus is going to float down from the clouds
I
and
don't think
save
that.
everyone, and we don't have to take any personal responsibility.
I
And
don't
that is the
think that at
problem.
all.
Well, yeah, it's about not taking personal responsibility. It's about
I
outsourcing responsibility to somebody else who's going to come and save the day.
I don't believe that at all.
You cannot believe it, but that's the
well.
case with the
I'm a proud
majority of
member of.
Christians today.
I can't speak for the majority of Christians. I can only speak for me, and I can say that for me and for the men who are part of my theological eschatological tradition, we believe in postmillennialism, which is that Christians need to take dominion over the world until all enemies are put under Christ's feet, and the last enemy being death. Right? That we need to conquer the world and make it a righteous and just society. That is the postmillennial position that we very much need to fight for the world, but we need to fight for the world in a righteous way, in a godly way. Right. So I know that there are many Christians who have what's called a premillennial eschatological position, and that is very much trust the plan. Premillennial eschatology is dispensationalism has been it's a historically novel perspective that's just come about in the past 100 or so years. And it does lead to that retreatist, I'm going to hide in my basement and wait for Jesus to come back. That's the whole Left Behind series. I'm very proud to be part of a large community of men, particularly on Twitter, that believe very much in taking dominion over their personal, professional, familial, and even cultural, even political lives. You may see arguments about Christian nationalism on Twitter. I'm a hard Christian nationalist. So I hope you will not count me amongst the men that are waving the white flag and waiting for Jesus to come back, because I couldn't disagree with that more strongly.
Well, that's great. I'm happy to hear that. But all I can say is the majority of Christians I know are absolutely docile and will not fight for this world and want Jesus to come down and save them. So it's nice to hear that the 1% of Christians that this this denomination that you're a part of differs from that. That's great, but I don't see that in the majority of Christians.
I agree. It's a giant pain.
And I also think it's fucked up. You think I'm going to hell, man? My life is worth something. God damn it! All right, that's bullshit. All right, seriously, think about this. That is wrong. Okay, you just because I don't read the same book you do and have the same belief system you do does not mean that I deserve to go to hell. I'm a good person. Okay, I'm just I don't have the same. I don't know what happens when you die. I'm not going to 100% devote my entire identity in life to something that I really don't know anything about. I've read a lot of the Bible. I've read a bunch of Christian books, but I don't know what happens when you die, and neither do you. and my life is still worth something.
Yeah, I don't disagree that your life is worth something, and so is mine, and I think so is everybody's, and I think that there's a respect for everyone being made in the image of God and all their lives having unique worth. But whether that life can reconcile you to a just and holy God is another question entirely. I'm not saying that
Okay,
your
so
life
I
is
just have
worthless.
to accept Jesus in my heart and believe something I've never seen. Why would God make it so confusing? I mean,
It's not.
why
It's the simplest
seriously,
religion
can
on
you answer
earth.
this question? Why does if God wants to save as many people, why does he make it this confusing?
Because God doesn't actually save as many people as possible. This is the sticking point for Calvinism for a lot of people.
Yeah, I've heard that too, like the narrow gate of heaven, and people will call out my name, Lord Word, and I'll say I never knew you and all this stuff. Okay, but like, does God really want a group of people that are just gonna be okay with believing something that they have no proof of? These are the kind of people that God wants? God
Well,
doesn't want people that think logically and earnestly want to believe in things that they can see. And
I mean, I have proof, and I have proof of God, and the proof of God to me is my redeemed life. And so, if you'll
that's not
allow
proof
me,
for God.
if
That's not proof for God at all.
if you'll allow me, let me tell you
Okay.
why it's proof. Okay,
All right.
so redemption. This is what redemption is. Redemption is you go through a struggle which may be generated by your own choices, but maybe not. But you go through the struggle, you go down into the depths, right? And then when you come back out from the depths, things are somehow better than they were when you started, right? So people who are cancer survivors, right? Cancer survivors will say, I wouldn't wish this on anybody, but I'm so glad it happened to me, right? And you've probably met people that have gone through challenging things in their lives that have said that, like, wow, that was really tough, but like, and I would never want anyone to go through it, but I'm so glad it happened to me. It made them into a better person. Okay, you've heard that. So that's what redemption is. So from a purely materialistic standpoint, there's no reason why that should be the case. Because if we think about it in terms of entropy, when you feed a certain amount of energy into a system, what do you get back? You get back less, right? You get back disorder. So there should be no such thing as redemption. You should have to fight to get back just to where you were before, right? You go down and you want to get back up to the same place you were at. You should have to fight to get back to that place where you were at. But that's not what happens. What happens is you go down, you come back up, and you're actually in a better place. You're in a higher state of order than when you began. And that's redemption in the life of a human being. That is what I have experienced in my life, is to have created, despite myself, even thinking with my best intentions, to have created chaos and disorder and pain for myself and others, and to have recognized that when I went through that process of repenting from it, turning, apologizing, confessing, that my life attained a higher state of order than I could have possibly achieved on my own. So I personally have been redeemed. There's no reason from a materialistic standpoint why that should be true. And yet it is. And that is also the story behind the entire Christian story. That is redemptive history. The idea that this great tragedy happened in the garden of the fall, right? That Adam and Eve fell into sin. Christ came and this horrible tragedy happened in his sacrifice and led to redemption for potentially all of humanity. That is a far more beautiful story than if Adam and Eve had never fallen to begin with. Redemption is the total history of humanity, and it's my story. And so that's my proof that God exists. You can't see it. You can't, I can't tell you, I can't show it to you. I can't show it to you, but that is my proof that God exists in the in the status of my own life, in the journey of my own story.
It's objectively not proof. It's not, by the definition
I
of the
didn't
word
say
proof.
it's.
It's not proof. You can't.
I didn't
Well,
say
you
it's
just said, well,
scientific
it's your
proof.
proof. It's your
I didn't.
belief, right?
Well,
But
it's not scientific.
Proof.
It's not scientific proof. It's not scientific proof. So what we consider proof in our modern age is what we can measure with our eyes: numbers,
Yeah, real
facts,
things.
figures. Well, I mean, like, we can't measure love. Is love real?
You can measure chemicals in your brain.
But that's not love.
You experience the emotion of love through different chemicals in your brain. Do you know?
That's infatuation.
So you can measure love.
No,
You
that's
can't.
not. No, you can't. That's infatuation. That's chemicals and infatuation. That's hormones. There are times where you love your wife, where you're not experiencing a chemical rush in your brain, but you know I have to do this thing because I love her. That's not a chemical. That's a choice, right? You can do the choice, but you can't measure the inward state.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, you should take that logic, and if you were a Muslim, you should say the same thing. My life has changed. I've been transformed. God has made my life better, and therefore God is real. It doesn't make your
Right. It's
God
not
real
proof.
at all.
It's not objective proof in that same way. I said that's my proof. I said that's my proof. There's more to it than just the subjective experience. Faith is not just a subjective experience. That's where a lot of Christians go wrong. I had a personal experience of faith, and that's all I need. There's more to it than that. There's more to it than that. There's right living, there's evangelism, right? There's participating in a church. There's the total way that you organize your life as a Christian and your total life view, transforming that and becoming a new person. Again, take from you the heart of stone and give to you a heart of flesh, right? It's both of those. It's the total reform of a human being. It's not just my own inner subjective experience.
I think people feel very comfortable with those ideas, and people want to feel like they have the answers, but I don't think that's you know I don't know. I mean, there are people who are born in different parts of the world, and they have different religions, and they believe their own religions just as earnestly as you believe in yours. And I think human beings are afraid of death, and we're afraid of the unknown, and death is the ultimate unknown, and we want to have comfort in that.
I
So,
mean,
I mean,
I
the
get,
difference is I'm just not gonna I'm not gonna condemn people for having a different belief system than my, as long as it's moral. But I don't see how you think that's okay to have somebody be going to hell because they don't believe in your religion. I
I
think
want you
that's a
to know that
horrible
I'm not
perception.
condemning. I'm not condemning you.
You're believing in a God which is condemning, and you're ascribing morality to that God. So you think it's okay. You do.
I mean, do I think it's okay? Like I don't have to think it's okay for it to be true. There are lots of things that are true that are not that I'm not personally okay with.
Would you
But like
believe in a God that's immoral?
I don't believe I believe in the God is not capable of immorality.
Okay, so then you believe that it's moral for me to go to hell because I don't believe in your God.
The better word is just. It
Okay,
is
we're
just.
this is the you're getting too caught up in semantics. Just,
Sure, that's
moral.
fine. I have to use precise terms, but because it's important. We have a just God, a God who believes in justice.
Okay, and morality. So
Sure, yes, you can
yeah,
those
okay, so
two are
you
linked.
you wouldn't believe in a God that you think is immoral. Therefore, the God you believe is moral, and you think it's moral for me to go to hell because I don't believe in your God. That's the
Again,
reality of the situation. I mean, you just because I don't believe in a book of a god demanding that a guy sacrifices his own son and cuts the part of the dick off of babies, and staffs turning into snakes, and oceans splitting apart for your ancestors to walk across the ocean, and all these ridiculous stories which are not historically accounted for at all. I'm going to a horrible place forever. I think that's ridiculous. Yeah.
I think you can be saved without necessarily knowing how to be comfortable with all the different aspects of the Bible, because what is required to be saved is to repent from sin and believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And you can have both of those things and not necessarily be 100% comfortable with every aspect of the Bible, but be committed to getting there. Like it's not required. Like it's not written on the front of this book. Like you must 100% understand and believe everything that's in here, right? Because a child can be saved. A child 5 or 6, 10 years old can be saved, can be a regenerate believer and not understand everything in the Bible.
All right. Well, that's your morality, but my morality is objective, and I believe in the poetic Eddas, and I believe that if you don't believe in Odin, then you're going to be going to hell forever. And my morality is objective, and it's changed my life and made my life a lot better since I believed in Odin, and therefore
Mm-hmm.
it's proof of it
Okay.
being true.
Okay. So are you going
Right?
out advocating? Are you going out advocating for Odinism for everybody? Like, is this a standard that everyone now needs to adopt because you
I guess
believe
I'm
it's?
an Odin maximalist now. Yeah, no, I'm being sarcastic.
I know. I
Obviously, I
get
don't
it.
actually believe these things, but
I get it.
I think people listen, man. It's like the Plato's noble lie. People need a lie to believe in. I mean, maybe we don't anymore. Nietzsche talked about how religion is becoming less and less popular, and we have to reevaluate our morality, or else we're going to wake up in a nihilistic death cult, which I think we have today, and I think he was right. But I mean, people maybe at large society needs to believe in a noble lie. Society needs to believe in things they can't prove, or things that aren't material, in order to have a nice cohesive blend. I mean, maybe that's the case, but I think that throughout history there have been many noble lies. There's been many religions, and for you as a Christian to claim absolute totality, like there's absolutely no question about it, my belief is the correct one and everybody else is wrong, I think is just kind of childish.
So we're back to the question of moral objectivism versus moral relativism. So, a very, very small percentage of people are atheists today who believe that there is no higher reality beyond material reality. But even they have a religious aspect.
I
A
mean,
religious
that's not what atheists believe. They just don't know. Atheists aren't claiming
that's
that they believe
that that's
something.
agnostic. That's agnosticism. Like, I just don't know. Like, agnostic, gnosis, lack of knowledge. I just don't know. Atheism is it's really anti-theism. Like, that is, we can say definitively that there's nothing there. So that's atheism versus agnosticism. So the rest of the people around the world, including indigenous tribal religions, they have their own religious perspective, spiritual religious perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so, are they all right? Are they all correct? Right. Bearing in mind the notion of whether or not morality is objective or subjective.
Yeah, you should talk with Knut Svanholm about the atheist agnostic. I mean, that's
Yeah, I
another
don't. Yeah.
debate of semantics. I would say I'm under that. I just don't know. You could call me agnostic.
Okay.
I don't get the what is the point of your question here?
Well, so I'm trying to again to get to a point of standards. By what
Mm-hmm.
standard are we using to judge the truth of religion? By what standard are we using to judge the objectivity or the value of morality? Like, because we have to agree on a standard. Because if we think that
We're not again. I'm gonna keep. You're asking basically the same question by our brain. That's how you use you
but
that's
there's
what
two.
you use to have your moral standards, which you believe in. You believe it's morally okay for me to go to hell, and I use my brain to choose my moral standards where I don't believe it's okay for me to go to hell, or by our brain that we have. That's why it's what everybody uses.
Okay, so if you don't believe in, we can talk about whether hell is just or not. That's a valid conversation. But so, how do you maintain your own moral standards when are you your own 100% effective police officer for all that?
Am I my own? Well, no. I mean, if I go out and I start killing a bunch of babies, then somebody is probably going to stop me at some point.
I mean what I mean. Of course, I don't. I would hope you don't do that. What I mean is that the totality of our experience of being human is more than just our actions. It's also also our words and also our thoughts. All those things
Mm-hmm.
are factored into our experience of being human. So, so are you, Andrew, personally able to be the most effective monitor of all of your thoughts, words, and actions? Do you determine the
I don't know
standards?
who else would be.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay.
mean, do you know my thoughts? I mean,
I
who else would know my
no.
thoughts?
Right.
Okay, so who else is going to be the moral police officer?
Sure. Okay. I mean, I'm not looking.
The difference between you and
not
me
a
is
trick
I
question.
don't believe that I need ancient Jewish blood magic rituals
Oof.
like the blood of
Nah.
the lamb. That's
Now
what it
you're
is.
getting.
Yeah, like the blood of
Now
the
you're getting.
lamb and
Okay.
animal sacrifice. I don't believe that I need that to be a moral person, and you do.
I don't need those things, and I don't believe that.
You need the blood
That's why
of
they exist.
you need the blood of the lamb. You need the blood of Jesus in
To
order to be
be
saved.
to be reconciled to a holy God as a result of sin. Yes, it's not blood magic.
I don't
It's a
see how
very
it's different from blood magic. It's
because
supernatural stuff. It's just like
because
different.
blood magic is will working, which is to say, blood magic is to bring about
God is will working then, right?
God cannot help but manifest His will, God's will, His decree. I think we
Okay.
understand that we understand something. We understand something very, very different. And again, this is in the story of original sin, where Adam and Eve disobeyed God and fell into sin, and were no longer in reconciliation with Him. And God asked for sacrifices from the Jews of animals, to bring into reconciliation, because it takes blood to reconcile with sin. But no amount of animal sacrifice could ever pay the price for human sin. So how
then
did
why did
God?
they have to do it in the first place?
Um,
Like why? It's just there are just so many things that do not make
because the
sense.
price for sin has to be paid. It has to be paid
But
somehow.
you just said it wouldn't fully be paid.
They could never fully keep the law. They could never fully keep the law because they were sinners. We screw up all the time, every day, constantly. No matter what we do, constantly all throughout our lives. And so God demanded these sacrifices of animals, which are really just things of value, and then grain offerings as well. So it wasn't just animals. But you see the blood and the bread there, the blood and the wine, bread and the wine, to attempt to reconcile people for their sins to God. But no amount of sacrifice of animals could ever do the job. So God, in His infinite mercy and His infinite wisdom and infinite justice, sent 1/3 of Himself into incarnate human form to pay the human blood sacrifice for sin while also being God. A hypostatic union, totally God and totally man, to pay the once for all price for all human sins forever for the elect, if we want to get Calvinist about it. So for the elect. So this was the way that God solved the problem of reconciling sinful beings to Himself, sacrificing 1/3 of Himself for that. God sacrifices Himself for our redemption. I can't think of a more beautiful story than that.
I don't know. I can.
What would, to reconcile you to God? What would be a more beautiful way of reconciling fallen, sinful, which we agree is fallen, sinful humanity to God? Because if humans weren't sinful, look around, right? So how else can we be reconciled to God?
I just don't. I don't live in that world that you live in. I don't live in this world where I believe there's somebody above me, and there's heaven and hell, and it's like if you believe in this thing that you can't see or whatever, you're going to have you're going to heaven. If you don't, you're going to hell. And two human beings. I don't know how old do you think the Earth is, but 6,000 years ago, according to the Bible, literally speaking. I mean, maybe you believe that, maybe you don't, but whatever. Two human beings, God just created them, and even though He's this all-knowing God, He surely must have known that they would disobey Him. Now all of humanity has to suffer because somebody they ate a fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is very ironic, by the way, that it's called that. I don't live in this world that you do. I think, I mean, what's more likely, that all of these things literally happened, or people thousands of years ago made it up? To me, the most likely thing is that people made it up, just like a bunch of other religions have been made up. And you think yours is the only real one that wasn't made up and actually happened, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's much more likely that instead of the entire history of humanity happening with two human beings, and then they ate some fruit and everybody else is doomed, and we're responsible for them eating a fruit and staff turning into snake, and a man talking with a burning bush, and you know uh the Son of God being sent here and feeding 5,000 people with a few small amount of food, and blind people being healed and walking on water. And sorry, but no, I think it's much more likely that people made that up and wrote it in a book.
Okay. So then, and I mean this as an open question. This is not a trick question.
Yeah.
Where do you think everything came from, and how do you explain the human condition?
I really have no idea. I'm skeptical of evolution. I'm not even ruling out the idea of a creator or creators, plural, or I really have no idea. I mean, I've created my child with another human being, and that's, I'm the creator of her, right? So, and she came from me, so it makes sense that we would come from something, and I'm not ruling that out, but I have not seen that thing that we have come from. So I don't know. I'm just not going to act like I know, and I'm not going to act like I have all the answers like you are. No offense, but you are, and every Christian is acting like they have a monopoly on truth and they have all the answers. And I think there's hubris in that.
So if you don't know, how can you say I'm wrong?
Maybe you're right, but if you don't know, how can you say that I'm wrong?
I mean, I can say that I can incorporate your worldview into mine. You can't incorporate my worldview into yours.
I think you're playing semantics too much.
I'm not.
I grew up with your worldview. I'm very familiar with your worldview. You can literally ask the same question that you asked me to you. You don't.
Let me rephrase that then. I have a framework to understand your unbelief, right? From your perspective of unbelief, you don't have a framework to understand my belief or anyone's belief, because you can't say that
How do I not have a framework to understand your belief? I completely understand your belief. I used to have your belief.
No, what I mean is that you say that you don't know, so you have no capacity of saying that I'm wrong. I could be right. You don't like that
Okay,
I assert that I'm right.
you could be right, but I could also be right. I mean, the difference is, again, I'm not saying that I have the monopoly on truth and I'm right and you're wrong. Maybe you're right, but I can't prove that you're right, and neither can you.
So I guess the point that I'm trying to get at with that is, like, it sort of makes me wonder, like, why are we arguing? Why do you have a problem with me believing, even if I believe that you're wrong? If all beliefs are subjective, what's the
Because I
big
think your
deal?
belief system is problematic, and the idea of loving your enemy is not good, and the idea of people going to hell because they don't have your belief system is not good, and there's a lot of horrible stuff in the Old Testament that you believe was legitimate at one point in time that's not good, and I don't think it's a good thing for society. I think that's problematic.
So you don't know what the truth is, but you know that I'm wrong. You don't know what's
I
right,
don't
but you know that I'm wrong. You know that the things
I
that
no, I don't. I know some things are true. I know the sky is blue. I know that
well,
it's
that's materialistic truth, but we're talking about spiritual truth, right? So,
okay. I
so
also know it's true that your life is going to be better, and it's moral to not lie to people and things like this. I have my beliefs, which are commonly held by a lot of people in society today. But you don't know. Okay, if you're going to say that I don't know what truth is because I'm just not claiming to know who is God, and I'm not speaking on behalf of God. Neither do you. Again, you don't know. You have no idea. You can act like you know. You can, believe you know, but you don't know just as much as I do. And this is the ultimate problem: is that Christians believe that they are the only ones who are correct and everybody else is wrong. And if people don't have your belief system, then they're going to a bad place forever. And that is childish and it's wrong.
but
You
I
don't
mean,
know. Neither do I. The difference is I admit it
but
and
I
you
mean, you're
can't.
you're assuming that I don't. You're assuming that I don't know.
You're assuming that you know. You're assuming
No.
because you don't know, but you're assuming that you know.
So I think so. What you don't like is my certainty.
Yes, I would say
Okay.
that's an aspect of it. Yeah, because you're certain that you know something which you have literally no idea about.
So you literally don't know whether I'm right, though, right?
Okay, again, I mean, how many times do you want to bring up the same thing? You can use the
Well,
same
no,
exact question with you.
it's important. It matters because you're asserting that we can't actually know, but
Okay,
you
so
know
I'm going
for
to use the same thing. I believe Odin is real, and so you
okay.
don't know. Okay, I can
Let's
use the same exact logic, but for my
yeah,
God, for a different God.
yeah, you can, and then we
Okay,
can have our we
so
can make
neither of us know. Can
well
we
no
admit that neither
then
of
we
us
can
actually know, and they're just beliefs that make us feel better?
no, because then we can actually, from that standpoint of making a positive claim about reality, then we can actually compare our positive claims of reality and see how they stack up.
You
See
can't
how
compare your claim of this is the problem, man. You don't. The only way that Christians can justify these insane beliefs is through a bunch of semantics that are mental gymnastics. You don't You have no idea, just as much as I do. You have literally no idea what happens when you die. You don't.
So you would prefer that I adopt your position of not knowing.
No, I'm not like you. I don't feel like I have to save the whole world with my belief system. And if you don't have my beliefs, then you're going to hell forever. I don't believe that. I
So
want you to be a good person. I don't want you to, harm me or my family. And if you do, then I'll defend myself. But
don't do that.
I'm not living in this world where I have the fear of this God that's gonna damn me to hell forever, and I have to save everybody. And it's like this. It's literally like Stockholm syndrome. I don't have
I don't
that
have that.
fear.
I don't have that. I don't have that, and I've never had that. I know that many Christians do.
I'm
and
pretty sure that the influence of heaven and hell influence probably you and a lot, if not all, Christians. You don't think that if there was this belief of eternal damnation, people wouldn't be Christian? You don't think that's influential at all? I think that's dishonest if you don't believe that.
Sure, I don't think that's the strongest case for Christianity is the threat of eternal damnation. I think the promises that Christianity makes for this life, for a redeemed version of this life, are far stronger than the threat of hell.
No, I mean
that's my
Jesus
personal
says
perspective.
In the Bible that you have to suffer and you have to hate your life, you have to hate your family.
That's not what he means by that.
I see it in the real world. I know tons of Christians who are poor and defenseless and weak people because they have this belief system. I think it's harmed a lot of people too.
Oh, for sure. But I mean, that you can take in. Humans are really good at taking tools and turning them into weapons. And that's just what humans do because of our sinful nature. So you can also find countless people around the world that have had their lives absolutely transformed. Prisoners, men on death row, people have done terrible things that have found redemption and peace and healing in Christ that is not possible any other way. That has to be accounted for as well.
I'm happy. I'm genuinely happy that their lives have improved, and if they need a belief system to do that, then that's awesome. That I'm very happy about that. That still doesn't make it true. So but that's good that their life has improved. I think a lot of people who've done bad things in their life and have guilt are more susceptible to Christianity because it's a way that they can feel redeemed. And if that's the case, then okay, that's fine.
It's more than, I think it's more than feeling redemption. It's a process of total life transformation. It's a process of rebirth. That's why they have a born again Christian. Like I have had that experience of being a born again person, of not being the man that I was just 4 years ago. And I wasn't in prison or anything like that, but I have that experience, and that's the power. That's the power that Christianity in its purest and truest form offers, which you can't get necessarily by threatening someone with hell, right? You offer them the chance at a redeemed life here. And yes, many people are kept, quote unquote, in line by the threat of hell, but I don't think that's a true heart transformation. A true heart transformation longs for justice, longs for the good, longs for righteousness, and
so you can't long for justice or righteousness or good without believing in the God of Israel and that Jesus died for your sins.
I think we would have to get clear on what situationally how that shows up. I think
it's a complicated answer, David. You can still believe in righteousness and morality and justice without believing in your God. You can.
Absolutely. We're all made in
to tons of human beings who don't have your belief system that they can't have morality without the God you believe in.
Right. The reason why they have morality in the first place is because God made them. Right. We're all made in the image of God, and that's where our morality comes from. Is that it's woven into us. It's part of our being. Right. So that's he put it into us. That's why society works to the degree that it does. But the fulfillment of that is found in faith in him, faith in his creator, faith in his son. So you can live a moral life, for sure you can. But the fulfillment of that morality actively seeks God to understand what the source of that morality is.
I guess we'll find out one day, Will.
Okay, fair.
Maybe you're right. I mean, have you ever seen that South Park episode when they show heaven and hell, and they show heaven, and there's some person who's this big checklist, and they're like, okay, everyone, the ones who got it right were the Mormons. And then it shows a bunch of Mormons in heaven. It's like, and then everybody else is in hell. It's like, oh, damn, I
Right.
mean, I don't know, man. I guess we'll find out one day. But I'm not gonna love my enemy, and I'm not gonna give up all my material possessions, and I'm not
Don't have
gonna,
to.
you know,
You don't have
do
to
a
give up your
lot of
material
these
possessions.
things, and I'm not gonna believe in things that don't make any sense to me, and I have no shame in that. And I mean, I'm happy to, yeah. I don't know what else to say. I mean, if everything you're saying is true, which I don't think it makes any sense, and I don't believe in it. If it is, then I will stand before God. If I somehow I die, end up in heaven, we're all up in the clouds, then I'll talk to him and be honest with him, and that's just the way it is. But your belief system does not make sense to me, and I can't force myself to believe something that doesn't make sense. And that's great that you have these experiences where you believe God has given these experiences to you, and okay, whatever. But I don't, and I can't force myself to have a belief that I just don't have.
I
So,
understand. I completely understand. I hope. I hope that amidst all of that I've given some answers to questions that maybe you haven't heard before. And I hope also that you haven't felt from me a sense of condemnation, because I don't condemn you.
dude, you got to see the irony in that,
But I mean,
right?
you
How is
understand,
that
like,
not ironic?
well, I mean, let's try a
Clearly,
different
the belief
example.
you have is a sense of condemnation. I mean, and
No, I
I'm
don't.
not mad at you. I think this is something that I personally think tons of people have fallen victim to this belief because it is a sense of condemnation for sure.
Well, you asked me to give you a straight answer, and I gave you a straight answer. But I don't
Yeah.
relate to you from the perspective of that answer. I relate to you as a man made in the image of God, seeking truth, who has a strong sense of morality in himself and is looking to find a place to complete that morality. I believe in the goodness of you. I believe in your goodness, and I believe in the uprightness and the sincerity of your search. And I don't condemn you, right, personally, from my perspective of not sharing my beliefs, but I can tell you what the beliefs say. I can tell you what the book says. That doesn't mean that I personally condemn you. Had I personally condemned you, and people did personally condemn you on Twitter, had I personally condemned you, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? But I felt the genuine longing and search for truth in the sense of what we might call moral outrage, calling out through that. And so I wanted to speak to that because I think it's a good part of you. I think it's a good part of you that comes from a good place. And my hope would be to show you where that place is, where that place it comes from is. But that doesn't mean that I personally condemn you or I personally judge you. If you want to ask me what the book says and what my beliefs say, I have to answer that question for you honestly. But that doesn't mean that I'm here looking at you and relating to you in that way. Other Christians would. And I think that's annoying and sad and gay. But I don't like.
I listen, man. I appreciate it, Will. I don't think you're like a bad person or anything, and I
Sure.
know you don't think I'm a bad person, but
Right.
I mean, like I mentioned many times on this podcast, you do personally believe that the God of Israel will send me to hell. So that is a personal belief of yours. Whether or not you think I mean, and you believe that God is moral too. So it's almost like outsourced condemnation in a way. It's not like you directly condemning me to hell, but you believe in a God who, in your mind, is moral and will damn me to hell. So it is a personal belief, right? So, but we don't have to. I mean, we've already
Yeah.
gone back and forth on that topic, and I think what I'm saying is very logical. But you know,
Well, so can I ask you then just one more question?
sure.
Okay. So let's stipulate that there is a heaven and hell. Let's just stipulate that. What do you think would be required by God to get into heaven? Like this notion of being a good person, quote unquote, good person. What does that mean?
If heaven and hell were actually real, what do I think would be required according to the Bible?
Like according to your we'll say moral intuition, because I think we can agree that people like Jeffrey Epstein, hell, right? No
Yeah,
question, right?
totally.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we agree that there is genuine active malice and wickedness in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that they shouldn't just die and get away with it, like, oh, that was good, I got to live a life of wickedness and sin. So we
Yeah, it should
agree
be
that,
punishment. Yeah.
right, exactly, and exactly, and like Stalin, all these people, right? That they
Mm-hmm.
should be punished in the afterlife. So, so that's that's hell. What should be required to get into heaven?
What should that's wow, that's a really tough question. I mean, if I were to decide what should be, well, I don't want any rapists up in heaven.
Right.
I don't want any. I mean, it's almost like, what do I want to have happen in society today? Like, I don't want any rapists. I don't want any murderers.
Right.
I don't want any liars. I mean, okay, we've all
Hmm.
lied, but I don't want people that
Sure.
like psychopathically lie, right? So, I don't know. I mean, I want good people where I mean, right here. I want to live around good people. I want to, I mean, I don't.
Hmm. Okay.
But I mean, this idea of like, I want people. I want to be in this place where only people who believe in things that they can't prove and have never seen and don't make sense, only they're the ones that are going to go to heaven. I think that's wrong.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we can. This is a question of justification. We can. That will take another couple hours to unpack. But okay. So you want good people to be in heaven. So we have to come up with a definition of what it means to be a good person. And
Okay.
I would like to posit to you that God does provide a definition of what it means to be a good person.
Well, maybe man does, who wrote the Bible, and you believe the Bible's inspired by God, but it's still written by men. But okay, so what does God say?
God says, "Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as
Okay,
yourself."
then under that definition, I'm not a good person.
Can you
I don't
find it
love
in
your
your
God. I don't.
well? Can you find it in your heart to love the God that sends Jeffrey Epstein to hell? Is there
I
something
don't.
lovable
But
about him?
I don't know if Jeffrey Epstein is in hell. I've
I
never
hope he's
seen
in
him.
hell.
I do too, and I
I
think
hope
it makes
Stalin's in
people
hell.
feel better thinking that he is. But I don't know if he is. I don't know what the fuck happens when you die.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. I mean, from a moral perspective, it would be
Yeah.
morally outrageous if on the deepest level, to imagine that someone like a Stalin would not be punished in the afterlife, that he could go through and kill millions and then he just dies. And it's like, okay, cool. He gets the same fate as the rest of us. Sweet. I think
I
that's
mean,
moral. I
yeah,
think that's
it
outrageous.
would be morally outrageous, but it's also morally outrageous that he was able to kill like 40 million of his own people too in this life.
I mean, yes, but which would be the greater sin? That he did the things and got away with it? I think that he got away with it would be pretty bad. That would be a strike against everything that we understand about what it means to live. That there would be consequences, because men who can be rich and powerful can avoid the consequences of their decision on life. This is where the limitations of power. If power dictates morality, then you can be powerful enough to prevent the consequences of your actions in this lifetime. But you're not
That it
powerful
still
enough.
doesn't make it moral, but yeah.
But I mean, but you understand what we mean. Like, you can be powerful enough that you can do terrible things, and your money and power can be strong enough to prevent you from ever experiencing any consequences.
Dude, listen,
Except,
I agree with like half of what you're saying. I think
yeah,
Joseph Stalin and like Bill Gates and all these evil Epstein, okay, yeah, they should be in hell. But I also don't believe that you should be in hell if you don't believe in the God that you believe in. I don't think
sure,
that's okay. I'm like with you
I
on
know,
half of it, which is where if you're a genuinely shitty human being, you should be punished forever, tortured. I want
cool,
Epstein to be tortured.
yes,
Okay, like
okay,
I want that, but
okay.
I don't think that I should be in the same place as Jeffrey Epstein. Do
I
you
don't.
not see how that's ridiculous? Come on. I mean,
No,
there's got to be a part of you that sees how ridiculous that is. You think
I
I should be in the same place as Jeffrey Epstein?
what I'm trying to say is
That's
that
what, but that, yes or no, right? That's actually what you believe, right?
so what I'm trying
That's
to
crazy.
say, no, what I'm trying to say is that if all we have to do is not be Jeffrey Epstein to be a good person, that's
Mm-hmm.
not a positive definition. That's a negative definition. You can't define a good person by saying, okay, well, I'm not that. We have to make a positive definition of what it means to be a good person.
But I also
Otherwise,
don't believe that you're a good person if you believe in the God of Israel. I think there are a lot of bad people who believe in the God of Israel, and they do it especially because they can do bad things and be forgiven too. I think that's a big crutch of Christianity.
and I would say that the people who do those bad things and just simply expect forgiveness to happen, I would say that they are not regenerate believers, because the desire of becoming a true Christian is to live and to act righteously only. And if someone thinks that they can just use Christianity as a get out of jail free card for committing wickedness, yes, many people have done that through history, but I don't think that those are regenerate believers that truly understand the heart of the gospel. And it's a shame that they're so public. It is a shame, but I think that the faith author offers something so much more. Okay. Okay. Well, I thank you for engaging with me in that dialogue. I appreciate that.
It was a good time.
Okay, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I really did enjoy it. It's like I said, I guess we'll find out.
Yes,
so.
and hopefully our discussion, will bless the men and women who are listening as well to get to hear this dialogue, this respectful dialogue. Like, I think it was respectful person to person as opposed to 280 characters at a time.
I think it was. It's good. We had some fire in the debate, but conversation, whatever you want to call it. But God forbid that my questions may have influenced somebody else, and I actually should say you do have you are a gutsy guy to have somebody like me on your podcast. I think a lot of Christians wouldn't want to do that. So
you're a gutsy man. Thank you. You're a gutsy man for coming on the podcast in the first place. Like, and for responding to my tweet, and for me, I picked up on the genuineness and the sincerity in the thread, and you picked up on my genuineness and sincerity in my response. And I think that led us here today. And I think that there's something that we can model this for people. Like, hey, men can sincerely disagree, and they can sincerely have a dialogue. And that sincerity is very important, because I'm all about men coming together. And I think part of that is like, we pick up on the sincerity in each other as well. And we try to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for a wonderful dialogue. Great afternoon, great conversation. I enjoyed the fire as well. So where would you like to send men to find out more about you and what you do?
So people can find me on Twitter. Handles Andrew_J_Howard. I'm also a Noster as well. I have my public key posted in a pinned tweet. I'm on LinkedIn as well, if anybody wants to connect on that horrible platform. I would say, that's about it.
We can agree on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Totally. It's
Cool.
a horrible place.
It's a horrible place.
It's not as bad as hell, but it's close.
That's pretty close. Okay, man. Thanks a lot.
All right, Will. Thank you. Cheers.